This is Frances Feldman interviewing David Kuroda in my home on this 13th of June. You're not superstitious, are you? Because this is Friday the 13th.
No.
For CSWA. David, say a word about identifying yourself, and then the transcriber will be able to distinguish your voice from mine.
Oh, I'm David Kuroda, and my voice is different from Frances Feldman. It's not quite as eloquent, but it's okay.
All right, then let's start on this interview. David, tell me how you happened to go into social work.
Well, my parents wanted me to become a physician, and we were from a very poor family. And I think they always wanted me to have a career and a profession that was distinguished, that was lucrative, and that was good for the family. So for a long time, I was a pre-med major. I studied to get into medical school. But I think I didn't have the real interest. I was in the library often at UCLA or USC, and my friend would say, let's take a break and let's go and have some coffee. And I never said no. So I would often go off, even if it was before a big paper was due or an exam. So what happened is I think I developed good friendships and relationship skills, but I didn't have the good grades, and so my future medicine was not what my parents would have wanted. But often as we would talk among my friends about what we wanted to do with our lives, I said I'd enjoy talking to people, and counseling for me as a profession would be very, very interesting and attractive. And one of my friends said, well, have you thought about social work? And I said, well, what does social work have to do with helping people and counseling? So I really didn't know very much about the profession, but at his suggestion, I applied to the school and I became involved, and I discovered a profession that for me has made all the difference in my life.
When was this?
This was in the late 60s, around 1969, 1970.
And you went right through for the 2 years, master's degree. David, you said your parents wanted you to go into medicine. I recall that we have on file in CSWA an interview with your father, who was a minister.
That's right. He passed away. He died in 1997. And he was a Protestant clergyman for, I think, over 40 years.
But he didn't want you to go into the clergy.
No, I think he realized that it's a very difficult profession, and he actually discouraged me from becoming a clergyman. I think in part because of how difficult the work was. I mean, there were satisfying moments, but I think he didn't encourage me to become a clergyman and follow in his footsteps.
But he liked the idea of your being in something that would involve counseling, I gather.
Well, I think he sort of grew to accept that. I think in the beginning he was probably disappointed that I didn't choose a profession that was more lucrative, that had more prestige. But I think he came around to appreciate what I was doing.
I remember, too, in reading his interview, that he was in a relocation camp, relocation center. You were, too.
That's right. In fact, I was born in a concentration camp, although my Jewish friends tell me, David, don't call it a concentration camp because it sort of minimizes the experience of the Jews in Germany. So we kid about that sometimes, but I was born in a relocation center where there were barbed wire, and there were guards, and the guns were pointed, toward us, not for our protection.
Which camp was that?
This was a camp called Amachi, which is near, near Grenada in Colorado.
Then how long were you there?
I'm not sure. I think I was born in 1943, and I think right after the war ended, right after World War II ended, we were all free to go, and we left. So that was around 1945. So I must have been around 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. And was it Los Angeles your parents had come from?
Mm-hmm.
So they were coming home.
Well, we didn't come back to Los Angeles. I think after the war ended, I think there was a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment. So we went back east, and so we actually went to New York City.
Mm-hmm. And so you lived in New York City?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you went to school?
Well, we were just there, I think, for maybe half a year, and then we finally relocated and settled in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you there? We
were there probably for maybe 2 or 3 years. My father, I think, had graduated from Wheaton College, mm-hmm. and he was accepted at Wisconsin, but University of Wisconsin rescinded his acceptance when the war broke out. So the only school that he could go to was a private Christian college called Wheaton College. Mm-hmm. So he went there.
How do you spell that?
Wheaton.
Oh, Wheaton. Yeah. Yes, I know where that is.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so how long did you stay then?
So then he went to seminary there in Chicago, so we were probably there for 2 or 3 years.
Do you remember anything of Chicago?
You know, just from pictures, I just remember seeing snow and buildings, but no, I don't have any memories of Chicago.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you come to California?
We came back here probably in the late 40s, 48, around there.
And was your father content to come back?
Well, you know, in the ministry, there is what is termed a calling. So ministers often don't choose their churches, but they are called by churches to serve. Mm-hmm. So I think he felt that he was doing what God wanted him to do. So he brought his entire family back to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. How big was his family?
I had 3 sisters.
Older? Younger?
They're all younger. I'm the oldest son of 3, oldest brother of 3 sisters.
Mm-hmm. So you have a paternal role as far as they're concerned.
Well, I didn't realize that until I had studied family structure in the School of Social Work. But yes, I think that's probably accurate.
Uh-huh. Then you went to school in the 1960s. That's the School of Social Work, but you've been at UCLA before that.
Well, I grew up in what would now be almost termed inner city schools, not far from USC, which during those years I think was not the best area. The schools weren't the best, but I had an okay education, and then I went to Fauché and Dorsey.
I went to Fauché also.
You did?
I was in the very first class when they opened up.
Wow.
And then I went to Manual Arts, which was also Dorsey didn't exist when I was in high school.
My sister went to Manual Arts. My mother went to Manual Arts. I didn't want to go to Manual Arts. I was afraid that I would get beaten up, and it was a pretty rough school during the time.
It was. It had changed. It interests me very much to recall that when I went there were only 4 black students in the whole school. There were several Asian students who lived in the Jefferson area. And one of our neighbors complained to my mother and thought that I shouldn't go to school with those blacks. And my mother said, I was going to learn differences and to live with them. Then it was all black for a long time when I began to teach at USC. There were no Caucasians, there were no Asians, they were all black. And it has changed quite a lot, and it's changed a lot since then, too.
As Fauché. Fauché used to be a very tough school, you know, with beatings. I remember teachers would get beaten with chains. I mean, horrible stories, but it's become a model school now.
I had missed hearing about that. Yes, the principal there is evidently quite a wonderful person and has worked very closely with USC. USC has been very much involved in their curriculum and in their development. So it is a model school. Yeah. Isn't that nice to know we went to a model school?
That's right. And that I went to the same junior high school, middle school that you did.
And then where did you go to college?
And then I went to USC as an undergraduate.
Oh, as an undergraduate. I didn't realize that.
I
You
was
spoke
accepted
about UCLA and USC, and I didn't realize you'd gone to SC.
Well, I was accepted at both schools, both UCLA and USC. And my preference really was for UCLA, but my grandfather, who had a son who graduated from USC, thought that USC would be a better school for me. It was private. The teachers, he thought, were more caring. Classes were smaller. So he paid for me to attend USC, which is what I did for the first 2 years.
Then what happened after the first 2 years?
Well, my grandmother got very ill, so there wasn't enough money. So my grandfather told me that he couldn't pay for my tuition any longer. And even though during those years it was not that much, it was far beyond what our family could afford. So then I transferred to UCLA.
So you got your degree there. So you got a degree from UCLA and then an MSW from USC.
That's right. That's why during basketball and football season I'm a pretty mixed up guy because I have such mixed loyalties.
Yes, it's difficult to go to a game when both are playing.
That's right.
Which one do you root for?
Well, I usually, typical for social workers, I usually root for the underdog.
Well, that's understandable and very generous. I want to know then, when you finished your MSW, what did you do as far as your vocation was concerned? Where did you work?
Well, my first job was at LA County USC Med Center, Unit 1, which was their medical surgery unit. And it was the best job that I was offered. I was actually very impressed by the supervisors there that had interviewed me. A woman named Ann Stark, there was Judy Dubbs, and my supervisor became Doris Kaiser. But, you know, for something that happened 30-something years ago, I can still remember those three social workers.
They must have made quite an impression, not just because it was your first job.
They did. You know, I had heard so many mixed comments about working for the county, particularly at what was then called, you know, the General Hospital. But I was very impressed with their qualities that they had as administrators and as social workers. And I think based on those interviews, I was very pleased to start there as a new graduate.
David, did you concentrate in medical social services at SC?
Well, during those years, there were no concentrations. I think USC's belief was that a generic education was the best way to go. So there weren't concentrations or specialties. The thinking was that if you got a broad enough education, you could work in any setting.
You think that's true?
Well, it was true then. I think I learned a lot. I'm not sure. I think in this age of specialization, it's probably not as true. But at that time, I think it probably was very helpful for me.
Yes, I think on the whole, it was a good way for the school to go. And a lot of students landed in jobs that they then really became specialists in through their work experience. How long did you stay at the hospital?
I was there for 2 years.
And then?
And then I moved over to community mental health. At that time, it was shortly after, I think, the Landerman-Petras-Short Act had been passed, and there was a lot of money that was being devoted to community mental health. So that's where I went for my next job.
And where were you located?
It was called, still probably is called West Central Mental Health. We were initially on La Brea Avenue near Olympic. And we moved to new facilities on Stocker near Crenshaw.
And what kinds of tasks did you perform?
Probably the most memorable task was being on the PET team, the psychiatric emergency team. And we would actually go out into people's homes and into the community and determine whether or not people needed to be hospitalized. So we did that.
Did you go out alone, or did you go as a part of a team?
We always went as part of a two-person team.
Who was the other person? I mean, what was the other person's field? Also social work?
Sometimes social workers, but often psychiatric nurses, clinical psychologists, and occasionally a psychiatrist.
And if you thought that the person needed hospitalization, what did you do?
Well, we were among the professionals that were empowered by the law to actually write the commitment papers, the papers that would involuntarily hospitalize people for their own protection. So we actually learned to write those papers, and we had the authority to do that.
Now this is after the state hospitals had begun to be downsized or eliminated.
You know, I'm not sure. I think it may have been around the same time, maybe a little bit before. I think that didn't happen until, at least to the scale that was pretty damaging when Reagan was the governor.
Yes.
But I think this happened before then, because this was in the mid-70s, 74 to 76 is what I remember.
Then where did the patients go?
Well, we had hospitals we were able to commit patients to, including County USC Med Center, to their psychiatric hospital. There was Metropolitan State Hospital. There was Camarillo State Hospital. And we also had a few what we call beds. We had the ability to hospitalize people at Cedars-Sinai and Gateway, actually, Gateway Hospital.
So you really had a choice of hospitals available, which is very different from today, I gather.
That's right.
Yes. And so how long did you stay with that program?
I was there for 2 years.
And then?
And then I got recruited to work at Children's Hospital by a wonderful social worker named Rama Weitzman.
Oh, yes.
I had met Rama when she had students in placement at County USC Med Center. And she was a field instructor. And that's where she and I began to work together by providing opportunities for training for interns and fieldwork students. So I think she recognized some qualities in me that she thought could be helpful in teaching. So when she was the director of training and education, training and social work at Children's Hospital, she asked me if I would consider applying to become the assistant director and provide training for students.
And so that's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Rama was at that time also on our faculty.
That's right, huh?
Yes. And so where did you get students from? They were from more than at USC, weren't they?
Well, when I was at County USC Med Center, they were only USC students that we worked with. And I'm not sure if they were undergraduate students for a while. And then at Children's Hospital, there was actually a special program called their University Affiliate Program. We had students from all over Southern California, so USC, UCLA.
And by that time, Long Beach also had a school of social work.
I think they may have, yes.
Yes. And did you enjoy that job?
It was a wonderful job. It was, again, the best job that I had until that time. One of our first students was Helen Levin.
Oh, yes.
And we got a call one day, I believe it was from I think either Joe DePaula or Rhoda Sarnat, asking about the student that had special needs. And of course, Rama was the one who would want to include any student that had the heart for the work.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually were very pleased to have Helen Levin, I think, who subsequently, along with her husband, made some donations to the school.
Yes.
But I was real pleased to have been a part of that because I think she was a wonderful student. It was a perfect setting for her.
How did she manage the fact that she was paraplegic?
She said she needed a few things that were special, and not that many. One was that she needed a phone that had a speaker phone capability. She needed to make sure that we had a ramp for her wheelchair. She navigated with her with a motorized wheelchair, and it was really amazing, Francis, how, despite her limitations, she was as effective as she was.
Yes. I had her as a student in class, and I recall a lot about her and the problems that she ran into when she wanted to go to a different school and then came to us. But that's a different story, and after this interview, maybe if you're interested, I'll tell you about what happened with her on the campus. But it was a very positive thing. And I think she would provide a real test of how an agency can handle disabled people who are competent people.
That's right. At that time, she was on the commission, I think, the Mayor's Commission for Developing Access for people in wheelchairs. I think she was in part responsible for some of the changes in the law that required access for with ramps and restrooms.
Yes, she was.
And so we would talk about that, and even though it was essentially clinical placement, we talked about her other activities. And I was real proud to be a part of that. There was one moment in our work. We work with children who have developmental problems, and one of the cases that was assigned to her was a girl who was around 10 years old who had cerebral palsy. A marvelous girl, and what we would do is we would provide counseling for these young women, and Helen was assigned to her. We had a facility that allowed us to observe the interviews, and so part of our training program involved my observing and listening to the interview. And there was a moment that I'll never forget where the young girl said to Helen in the wheelchair, I never ever met anybody that could really understand how I speak, and really, when you said that you kind of understand how it is for me with my disability, it means so much to me. And Helen looked at her and she said, you know, Aurora, I don't have cerebral palsy, but I too can't do things with my arms and my legs, just like you. So I think I understand at least a little bit of what it must be like for you. So Francis, when I saw that, I thought, wow, you know, this is really something. And this is what we're teaching. This is what our profession is. And I think it was a very proud moment for me to see my student be so effective.
Well, it's heartening to me to hear it, too. I followed her very closely through her whole life after she had been a student. And I can see how effective she would have been in that instance. I think she's one of the people we can be most proud of in the school. So then you stayed at Children's Hospital for 2 years, did you say?
I was there for a long time compared to my other jobs. I was there for 5 or 6 years. So we had many, many students. One of the important things I learned there was to work with other disciplines. We had what we call an interdisciplinary approach to helping children and their families. So I was there for about 5 years.
And I gather you found it gratifying.
Yeah, it was a wonderful job. So from 1976 to 1981.
Did you run into problems with other disciplines?
Almost always, yes. I think there was some competition between what the psychologists did, what the educational psychologists did, what the psychiatrists and the residents did, and what the nurses also did. So I think there was some competition and some conflict, but we always worked it out. But it was a good thing because I think it helped sharpen my understanding of what unique roles social workers have.
And I would imagine it has some carryover to what you do now in terms of the legal profession.
It does. I think what I learned is that there are many different professions that we have that can help children and families. And rather than view them competitively, we're using much more collaborative approaches. And I think that helps us, and I think rather than lose our focus, it helps us gain more respect for our profession.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
I'm not sure if I told you, but when I left the court and I opened up my own practice, I wasn't going to put social worker or LCSW after my name. I was going to simply say David Kuroda. And I wasn't going to put LCSW on my cards or on the building directory because I thought it could be hurtful rather than helpful to have me associated with a profession. I finally decided to put LCSW after my name, and often in meetings I introduce myself as a clinical social worker, and it's made a difference. The first people, I think particularly attorneys who don't know, would ask me, what is a social worker, what's LCSW? But now I'm proud to say that I often hear attorneys, when they hear about someone's qualifications, oh, LCSW? Oh, that's what David Kuroda is. It's a social worker.
That's great.
So rather than kind of drag me down, I think it helps the profession. And
I think you've made a great contribution. Then you left why did you leave Children's Hospital?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there are a combination of factors. I think I had done as much as that I was able to do, and the administration there, I think, felt that I was not, that I would never be made the director because I was not director material. I don't know if it was true, but that was how I was viewed by the executive director. So I thought that really I didn't have any future there at Children's Hospital.
Had Rama left by then?
Rama had left. She was the director, so when she left, I really missed her, and our program really, I think, was never the same. But after she left, I became the acting director, and because of budget cuts, I was not replaced. So I had that title acting for a long time, and I think for some reason I was never viewed in the same way as Rama was.
So you decided to go elsewhere.
So then I was more open to other opportunities, and at that time, just as I had gone to community mental health in the mid-70s when there were changes, California had just passed a law that required mediation in family law cases involving children, and so there was a lot of excitement about this new program, and that was in 1981 when I then left Children's Hospital and went to work for the Superior Court.
Well, tell me about that experience. What you did, who you worked with, what you enjoyed, didn't like.
Well, one of the interesting things was when I started, it was long after the court wanted me. During that interview, there were 3 people who were interviewing me, including one social worker who was the director, Hugh McIsaac, and 2 of his supervisors. And actually, during the interview, he said, well, we're very interested in hiring you, David. How soon do you think you could start? This is in November. And I had, at that time, because Rama Weitzman had left for another job, I had her students. So I had 5 social work students. And there were no other social workers at our agency, at UAP. So when he asked me, well, David, if we decide to hire you, how soon can you start? I said, I think I could probably start in June next year. And 2 of the supervisors, actually all 3 of them were shocked. Well, why? And I said, I have a commitment to students from USC. And 2 of the supervisors, of course, would not have hired me because of that. Because the other 2 people that were hired started in 3 weeks. And I said, I can't leave these students. So I said, if you want me to work here, I can come here in May, but no sooner.
When was this discussion?
This is in November.
November.
So Hugh McIsaac, to his credit, respected that commitment to training and to students. And he was able to work out something. He says, suppose you start here in January, but you can go back to Children's Hospital, and we'll even pay you, for part of your time, and provide a supervision to the students. You think something like that could work out? So we negotiated some arrangements so that I was able to fulfill my commitment to the students and start at the Superior Court.
Well, that was very good. You, of course, being a graduate from the school, would know what's involved in neglecting students.
That's right, and I think he brought, in fact, many of the former directors of the conciliation service at the Superior Court were social workers. Before Hugh, there was, of course, Meyer Elkin, who started many of the programs at the court. And so the social work contribution, I think, to the court services, I think, has been very, very significant.
Well, then you started in May, full-time. In May, you were already connected. Describe what was going on and what your part was.
Well, there was great excitement because of the newness of the mediation program. And we were, it was probably one of the best times for court-based mediation programs in the country. Not only were we I think we were the very first court program that had mediation. We were the largest, and during those years, I think we were the best. This is, compared to all the other courts in the nation. I'd say 80% of our staff were social workers by training. And what we did was help resolve disputes between parents so that the courts wouldn't have to hear these cases, and the parents and families could avoid costly trials and hearings.
Were these always when there was a divorce at issue?
Yes.
And how did they come to you then? Referred by the court or the attorney?
Well, the judges...
It was mandatory?
Well, by this time it was mandatory. It was required by state law. California had passed the first mandatory mediation law in the country. Actually, family law in California has been very, very progressive. It was 10 years before then, in 1971, that California first passed the no-fault divorce law. And of course, since that time, all the other states have followed California's example. So 10 years later, California again set the trend and really a better way of helping people get divorced, really good for children and families by passing the law that required mediation before all hearings and trials.
What did mediation consist of?
Mediation was different from therapy and counseling, but relied very heavily on the skills that we learned in the School of Social Work. It was problem. We looked at the problem, which typically was that the parents were in conflict about how they were going to take care of children after divorce. Then they were called custody and visitation disputes. Now we refer to them as differences over parenting plans. And what we would do is we would use our clinical skills in listening and really trying to understand the reasons behind people's positions and help them put aside those differences and help them get beyond the anger and resolve disputes and come to agreements for their own children.
Did these tend to be conferences that involved simultaneously both parents, or was it one at a time, or what mode did you use?
Well, you know, the lawyers typically always have people together.
Mm-hmm.
So we really use that model a lot, so that we would have both parents, the father and the mother of the children, together.
Mm-hmm.
But occasionally we would see people separately and individually. And over the years, the laws regarding domestic violence cases affected how we provided services also. So then there are some laws now that require individual sessions when there are concerns about domestic violence.
I would think there would be times when one member of a couple would be very uneasy about talking in front of the other. And so you took that into account.
That's right. Now, lawyers didn't do that, but I think the contribution that we made, that the social workers made to the process, was to recognize that and to honor individual differences in styles and communication, so we would often have individual sessions.
Then tell me about the way your work in the courts progressed. Did you continue to work for other people? Did you work independently?
My work changed over the years because I was interested in more than just the mediation. Mm-hmm. I became interested in working with lawyers, with the Bar Association. I became interested in more educational models and doing things in the community. You know, for example, when I was assigned to the district court in Van Nuys, I was invited by the Bar Association to speak at one of their monthly meetings. And during that meeting, I realized that lawyers and our staff and our mediators really needed to know more about each other's work. And so I began to express a lot of interest in doing work with the Bar Associations and with lawyers. So I called Hugh, our director then, and he was always encouraging of that. And so even though it meant that I would maybe see one less case that day, I was encouraged to go to these meetings and meet with people in the community to develop those collaborative relationships. And that became something that I think I did more and more. And eventually I was put in charge of all the district courts, and we would put on these divorce seminars that were provided as a community service. Mm-hmm. And these became model programs, and we would have these all over the county, attracting as many as 700 people at one time, including press coverage. The TV stations used to cover these programs. And what we were doing is getting the word out about the needs of children of divorce.
Give me some information about what these seminars contained. What kinds of information did you communicate?
We had morning presentations on the three aspects of divorce: the legal divorce, the social divorce, and the emotional divorce. And we would pick prominent people, judges, clinicians. In fact, a number of USC faculty had been included. I think Clarine Dawn Roston was one of our presenters. So we would have these in plenary or group sessions in the morning, followed by special workshops in the afternoon. And so people could come and find out more about different aspects of divorce.
And the people who came were lawyers?
People who came these were people from the community.
Oh, general.
Who were either getting divorced, thinking about divorce, or who knew someone who was involved in the process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you thought that that was a helpful thing?
Mm-hmm.
I just have to make sure that this is still going.
Okay.
So you felt those were very successful?
Yes.
And how long did you continue? And did you go to all of the communities?
No, we, not all of the staff were interested in putting these on, and they required a great deal of work. Mm-hmm. We, of course, expected to do our other work. So really, it was an additional responsibility and burden, and not everybody wanted to do that. And our approach was if a staff member wasn't interested, we didn't require it of them. We didn't force it on them because we thought that wouldn't be very helpful. So these tended to be held in the districts where the staff were interested. So we had, for example, a number of these in the South Bay and Long Beach area. Ed Hummel was in Long Beach at the time, and we would have joint programs alternating between the South Bay, the Torrance area, and Long Beach. We had a number of programs in the San Fernando Valley. Mm-hmm. A few programs in Pasadena, but not too much in the other parts of the county.
Are they still ongoing?
No. The current administration, I think, is not doing this.
But then how long did you stay there?
At the court?
Uh-huh.
I was there from 1981 to 1999.
And that's when you went into your private practice?
That's right, uh-huh.
What impelled you to make that change, to go from the courts into private practice?
You know, leadership is a crucial issue at the court, in all organizations, and in this country. And sadly to say, the leadership in many organizations, including the courts, were not always consistent with the values that social workers have. An example was in a meeting with some of the judges and some of our administrators. We always had the tradition of talking about the needs of children and families. So I think one of the judges was talking to us about our program and about how we can improve our procedures. And I said, you know, it's important for us to remember that the reason that we do this is to help children and families, to help them get through this process so that divorce is not going to be such a destructive, hurtful, harmful experience for them. Because I think some of the things that we do in the courts are not good for children. After that meeting, my boss came to me and said, David, we have to stop talking about what's good for children and families. We are here to meet the needs of the court, meaning we are here to do what the judges want.
But the purpose in setting up the program was to meet the needs of the children and the families.
That's right. And most judges are open to that. You see, I think our job in social work is not just to do what other people tell us to do, but also to provide ideas, leadership, a vision for how family by family we can make things better for the next generation. So the judges were always receptive to me, to us, because of our ideas, and because we could explain to them in a way that they understood and cared about. So we would often be responsible for changing procedures and policies. Well, during the last few years, that view of our role and that vision of what the family court services should be changed. And at some point, you just accept the reality rather than try to change it.
But the law itself remained as it had been. It wasn't modified. It was just the interpreters.
The law remained. In fact, there are some some court cases that describe the requirement for meaningful mediation. Well, that changed.
Okay, we're on the other side of the cassette, so we can keep on going. I don't suppose that it is really so unusual that over time, the way a law its intent is interpreted to begin with, changes as other people come along and have to interpret and apply it. But it was discouraging, I would imagine.
It was, because we had built up a model program. People would come to us from other states, from other countries, and they would want to see, what we were doing. But a lot of that changed.
But it was enough change that you thought you needed to move to something else.
Yes.
But you didn't really move to something else. You just changed your location and your auspices. Is that right?
That's correct. I think the work that I do is very similar to the work that I was doing for the court. But Frances, I have always been involved in public service. I have always worked for nonprofit, for government agencies, where it didn't matter if somebody could afford the fee or could afford the service. I was always involved in agencies where your income didn't matter. But now, to be in private practice, for me to have to generate an income to pay for expenses is very, very different.
I can see that it would be almost an about turn, a complete turn. How did you deal with that? How did you come to terms with the fact that you had to decide on compensation levels, what you would give for that compensation, etc.? Now, let me put that differently. What did you take into account when you decided to make the change from working in the courts to being out on your own? What was involved in that?
My son actually, after hearing me come home and talk about how tough a day I had, finally said to me, Dad, why don't you just quit? And I said, I can't just quit. What am I going to do? And he said, just open up your own practice. With all the brashness of a 20-year-old. That's what he said. But I started thinking about that. And I started to think that maybe I do have a service, maybe there is something that I can do in the private sector that could be of help to people. So I think that helped. I think I began to realize and it happens every day now, where people will call me seeking my services. David, we need your help. And you know, there's some people, many people, Francis, will come for a session, for mediation, and they don't even ask what the fee is. There is such value placed on some services that we provide as professionals. The fee is whatever is charged. So, you know, I've been talking to colleagues and I've been encouraging them. In fact, we just recently had a discussion about the fees for a group that I'm involved in called A Better Divorce. It's a collaborative approach to helping people get divorced. We are talking about fees that reflect our services and the value of our services. So for my mediation now, I'm charging $200 an hour. And just yesterday, after a session, a 2-hour session, so each of the parents paid $200. As the woman writes her check, she gives me this check for $200, and she says, "This is the best $200, David, I've ever spent." See, that helps me realize that the service we provide people is worth a lot. And I think one of the problems in our field in social work is that we diminish our worth by how we charge, by how we view ourselves, how we present ourselves. And I've come to respect our profession, to respect what I can offer. Because, you know, what's happened in our sessions is that mothers and fathers are getting along better. They're able to better love their children. They stay out of court. And the fees that we charge, I think, should be more comparable to what lawyers charge, rather than what is commonly viewed as, you know, a therapist's fee.
Well, I agree with you. It reminds me of my early research in the social psychological meanings of money. And you couldn't even get agency personnel to talk about charging fees because money was not something you talked about. And so I'm very interested in the progress that has been made over the years, since many agencies do charge fees now.
That was an issue, though, when I was at the court, because when the law was passed, mediation was to be funded out of the marriage license fees, copies of birth certificates, marriage licenses. So the service was to be provided at no cost to the litigants. We were really excited about that. One of the issues that came up when I was the director there was about fees. And the court administrator said, "David, we're not going to charge fees, but can you give us some idea? Can you do this analysis for us and tell us how much it actually costs to provide the service? We just want to know what the value of our service is." So, believing what I was told by the administrator, and that was, we are not going to charge fees, we just need this for our information, I compiled an analysis of what the fees would be in order to offset the salaries for our staff. Without consulting me, within a matter of months, we find out that the court is now going to charge a fee for mediation. I think at that time it was $110 per person for a mediation session. I was really upset, Francis, because I was deceived about the reason for the information analysis I was requesting, and I wasn't consulted at all. And I had always believed that the law provided for mediation, required that mediation be provided, and that a fee would not be charged.
How could it be justified? I mean, how could the fee charging be justified?
There was probably something that the administrators viewed as a loophole, perhaps. But I think because the law didn't say there could not be a fee, they felt they could charge a fee. That fee created huge problems for the court. For many people, it's not that much. They could pay that. But some people walked away from their families because of that fee. I'll never forget this one man came up, and I think he was a truck driver, and he didn't know about the fee, and so he was told, sir, we need to get this money, otherwise there's not going to be mediation. And what he wanted to do was simply to see his children. He didn't have a lawyer. He couldn't afford that. And ordinarily in mediation we work out these plans so fathers and mothers see their children. He said, I can't pay that. I'm going to walk away. And I guess it means I'm not going to see my children. Another woman said, $110? That's part of my rent money. I mean, what do you want me to do? You want me to pay for mediation or pay my rent? So she had to walk away. And there were stories after stories of families.
And there were no exceptions made, that if they didn't have the funds, they would still have mediation?
No, there were exceptions. There were these forms and there were these procedures. You had to go and get approval. And it was just, for most people, it was like saying, pay the fee or else. So even though technically there was a means for them to ask that the fee not be charged, in reality, for people without lawyers to be required to fill out all these forms and in a timely way, I think essentially said, no, either pay the fee or we're not going to provide the service.
Was there then a noticeable drop-off in clients?
There was a drop-off, and the drop-off was disproportionate based on income. The people that had the means could easily afford the money. People that didn't, so the drop-off was greater for poor people. And I've always believed that the service that we provide should be available to everybody, and one should not be denied service because of the ability to pay. But something exciting happened because one of the public interest law firms, here at Buhai Family Law Center, saw the problem, and they actually filed a case that actually went up to the Supreme Court that overturned the fees.
Oh, did it? So that now there isn't a fee.
That's right.
Well, that's good.
And I was very glad that happened. In fact, I saw this person. Her name is Betty Nordman, who is the executive director of the Harry Buhai Center for Family Law. And she is a strong advocate for everybody, but especially those without means to have access to the judicial system. But by having that, in fact, the case was titled Hogaboom versus Superior Court. And Justice...
is that Judge Hogaboom?
Judge Hogaboom. Do you know him?
I did.
He's a marvelous man. I talked to him before. He, at one time, was the supervising judge of the family law departments at the Superior Court. A marvelous man. I think he was also general counsel at USC.
Yes, he was. That's how I knew him.
Oh. So he put his name on this case. So the so extraordinarily titled case, Hogaboom versus Superior Court. I think there were two other former supervising judges. So the people prevailed, and the fee was rescinded. And I can't tell you what part I played in that.
Why not?
But I can say I was very glad that law was changed and the fee was rescinded. And it's made a difference, I think, for many, many people. to gain access to the services that I think are so important.
You're reluctant to say what your role was. You say you...
I am.
Well, I won't press you, but I'm curious.
My heart is I have a heart for the work, and I think the satisfying experiences, some of the most satisfying experiences come in sessions with people. I also realize, Francis, that there can be greater impact made when you can change laws, or when there are court cases that can overturn procedures. So part of my job at the court was to analyze and influence legislation. So there are a number of bills that came across my desk that we would provide analysis for. And I've been in Sacramento testifying for and against certain laws that I think would affect our service and the way we provided those services. So I think I had a great interest in not only, I guess now we talk about the macro level, but changing policy, public policy, I think can make a big difference for many, many families. So some of my involvement at the court was directed at that level.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm a great believer in social workers using their knowledge and understanding to put into effect some changes in policy. And not enough do that.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's stressful, and the public forum is a very difficult one. But I was asked to go up and testify in Sacramento. There was a law that was pending before the legislature about custody and joint custody and children. And I'm not sure if you've ever been there to testify, but
not in this area, but I've done that.
It's a very chaotic process,
yes.
And you've got to be very quick on your feet, and you'll sometimes have just 2 minutes to make a statement. Mm-hmm. The members of the Assembly or the Senate aren't always paying attention, they're distracted. But there was one time when I was called, and I was the next person. Mr. Kuroda, would you state your name and where you're from? So I said, I'm David Kuroda. I'm the director of the Mediation and Conciliation Service at the LA Superior Court. And I started to give my testimony, and I was interrupted. And I forget who it was, but the senator said, are you saying we should be like Solomon and cut the baby in half? I said, with all due respect, Your Honor, that is not what Solomon did, and that's not the story of, I think, of what happened with the mother and the child. As you will recall, there were two mothers who were arguing about which baby was hers. Solomon had no idea. Solomon was not going to cut the baby in two. And the story really is, I think, about the mother who loved her child more. And I said sometimes, and in fact in this case, it was a mother, the real mother, who was willing to give up her child rather than to have her child hurt, cut in half, that gave up more out of love. I said sometimes there are parents who love their children, and I think we should not necessarily have laws that require them or that are harmful to these mothers who may love their children more. I said it better at the time, I'm not sure.
Well,
but
it sounds very eloquent to me now.
But it's an example, I think, of how I use my position with the court and my feelings about children and families to influence public policy.
Well, I can see that was a real service. How did the senator respond? Or did he?
He acknowledged what I said, and he was listening.
Well, that's good. There's hope for some senators. What about some of the other experiences you had?
In addition to the work that I did as the director, I was really proud of how I managed our staff. We had 12 different judicial districts, from Pomona on the east to Lancaster in the north, Santa Monica on the west, and then to the south, Long Beach, and all the courts in between. And everywhere there was a Superior Court operation, we had a Family Court Services mediator. And what I did was I empowered the mediator in that court, we call them senior family mediators, to handle procedures, local policies, outreach to the bar associations, and encouraged all that. So I was real pleased with how we handled that. And we never had problems, or we seldom had problems. But you know that today, Francis, the members of the staff belong to a union. They pay union dues. We are union representatives. And partly because the way their working conditions are no longer the same, and the way they are treated as professionals, I think, has really changed. So that's one of the things that I'm really proud of. We had a staff that really liked the work. We would value what people were doing. At each staff meeting, often we would read letters. I would get these letters. Dear Mr. Kuroda, I want to commend the mediator in Long Beach. He worked with his family for 2 hours, and this impossible situation was resolved, and my client is so happy, and I want to say he did a marvelous job. He's worth every penny he gets. So we would take these letters, and at the meetings, I would read the letter, leave the name off. Sometimes I would say, by the way, the name of the person was. So staff, I think, felt respected and appreciated. And in this field, that's a hard thing. People, I think, get tired and they get burned out and discouraged. So I was very proud of how I was able to work with the staff.
That was very wise, because rewards really are needed. There isn't monetary reward, so it has to come in some other form. But that's good. Now, in your private practice, before we started the tape, you began to tell me about some of the things that you do with the bar associations, with lawyers, etc. Could you repeat some of that? In other words, you don't just sit in an office all day and talk to people who are in trouble.
No, although that'd be very comfortable to do. I think it started out with my needing to generate an income and have business. I was pretty scared when I opened up my private practice, because I had to sign a lease for my office for 3 years. And the commitment for that was going to be pretty substantial. And if it didn't work out, we'd probably have to refinance or sell our house or something. So I was pretty worried. So I began to see the work as a business.
I assume your wife was involved in all of this consideration.
She was involved to the extent she supported what I was doing, and she encouraged me and said, you're going to be terrific, David. I'm not worried about you. Yes. And that's made a lot of difference. I think if she had expressed any reservation, any doubt at all, I probably wouldn't have done this. But she believed in me more than I believed in myself.
Well, she had a better perspective.
She may have. Now, sometimes we're the last persons to see, our strengths and our weaknesses.
Yes, I think so. So you really started because your son made that very important statement.
Mm-hmm.
And your wife, you have another son. You have 2 children.
That's right, uh-huh.
And so they supported you in this. They supported the idea
Mm-hmm.
of this. Okay. So you now sign a 3-year lease, a little apprehensively.
I had to get furniture.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at used, cheap furniture, Francis. You know, I come from a poor family, and so we always got things used, hand-me-downs. And my wife said, David, why don't you just get nice furniture? So even though it was going to cost us more, that's how we started out. Even determining the fee. I had no idea what private practitioners charged.
Now, how did you decide on what a fee should be?
I called some of my associates, my friends in the community, and I said, can I meet with you over lunch, and can I talk to you about what I'm thinking about doing? So my friends were I spent a career, I think, developing relationships, and if that's one thing that I could pass along to others. My marketing started the day I had my first conversation with somebody else, and I wrote the person's name down, and I remembered. I think I've, over the years, tried to be generous, thoughtful, and encouraging of others. So at a time when I needed that, there were plenty of people who were willing to offer that in return, and I'll be grateful, for that. So I would ask people, well, how do you work? How long do you see people, and what do you charge? So I began to talk to people, and I had a friend who was an attorney, and I was going to charge $150 an hour. He said, David, that's too low. You should go at least to $175. I think you should charge $200. I didn't think people would see me if I charged that much. I didn't think, Francis, I was worth that much. So I settled at $175 when I started. People appreciate what I do. So our worth is well beyond, I think, a dollar amount. I also, as I talked to more and more people, one of the persons I talked to was a lawyer who was also starting out. She had grown tired of litigation, and she opened up a mediation practice. And she was very interested in children and divorce, and so she was going up to the Bay Area for a weekend. She said, I'm going to go up to the Bay Area. Do you know anybody there that I could talk to? I said, sure. There's Judy Wallerstein. There's Janet Johnston. These are people that were at the Center for the Family in Transition, which probably has generated more research and books about children of divorce and the effect of divorce on children than any other group. So I said, why don't you call them? And I gave her the phone numbers. So she went up and she met with Jan Johnston. She says, David, may I use your name? I said, sure. So she calls Jan Johnston. Jan doesn't know Kim. David Kuroda gave me your name and said that you would be a really good person to talk to. Well, Janet Johnston, who's really quite prominent in the field, spent hours talking to Kim Davidson, and during that conversation she said, you know what, you ought to look into collaborative law, collaborative divorce, brand new concept. So Kim got all excited. She brought these articles back. We had lunch. We now have a group of 24 professionals, lawyers, mental health professionals, mostly social workers, financial professionals, and we have started a whole different way now of helping people get divorced.
Is that what you mean by collaborative divorce?
Mm-hmm.
Is that these people with their special areas of interest collaborate?
That's right, and they collaborate in the interest of helping families. Mm-hmm. So it's divorce without court, and it's also interdisciplinary. collaborative divorce. So there is a group in West Los Angeles now. There's actually a Los Angeles Collaborative Family Law Association. And I've been involved in that group, even though it's not in the South Bay. And so I go up to the west side. We meet at Crossroads School. Mm-hmm. The leader of that group is from probably one of the most prominent law firms in Los Angeles, that's probably better known for advocacy and their litigators, not necessarily for collaborative approaches to law. So she's starting this program. She has a lot of the prominent lawyers in town involved now in this process.
I think that's quite a contribution.
Mm-hmm. I was on the LA County's Family Law Symposium committee, and I looked at the list of the committee members the other day, and it's lawyer, well, they have Esquire after their names. Lawyer Esquire, lawyer Esquire, lawyer Esquire. One person, David Kuroda, LCSW. So it makes the work more interesting and satisfying, but I think it's also good for the profession that we're also involved where we're needed, and we shouldn't be too shy or bashful about the contributions that we think we can make.
I think that's very important, because the kinds of skills and knowledge about human behavior that social workers learn can't be adapted to a variety of settings. And you're a good example of how that's happened.
Well, thanks. This recent award that I was given, Lifetime Achievement in Social Work by NASW.
Yes.
One of the criteria was enhances the profession and work with regard to other professions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that I've brought to this work, mm-hmm. so that judges and lawyers and those in the justice system have come to appreciate contributions that we make as clinicians, as social workers.
That's a very distinguished award. Have you had some others besides?
I was honored as the best field instructor one year, the Jules Levine Field Instructor Award.
Yes, well, I think that's quite an auspicious one.
I'm pretty proud of that one.
Yes, and you should be. Well, for such a young man, you've done quite a lot, and some of it has been recognized. Looking back over your experience, what do you think was the most satisfying? Or is there any one thing that you can identify that way?
The story that I told you about Helen McVeigh
Yes.
brings me back to those years in my professional development that probably come close to a moment when I felt was really important. And I think that was when Rama Weitzman called me and said, because I was pretty young at the time, I must have been, I think, in my early 30s. Mm-hmm. She said, I would like you to apply for this job as the Assistant Director of Training and Social Work. And we will, if that's okay, we want to set up a meeting with, he was then the acting dean, Carl Schaefer. I think it was at that moment, Francis, I realized that maybe I do have something to offer. And Rama is a person that I have enormous respect for. So I thought, gee, if Rama thinks I can do this, mm-hmm. maybe I do have qualities that could be useful and helpful. Because that was the beginning of my work as a field instructor, and administration, my connection with USC, meeting Rhoda Sarnett and Lil Hawthorne, going to those meetings, and then I'm not sure how you heard about me, but you're inviting me to be on the board for the archives. Sort of brought me back in contact with the school, because for many, many years I was not involved. So there are a few people that I think have been very meaningful and important in my life, and I would probably say that that's one of them. I would not have been named social worker, given the award that I received, had I not been involved with you and USC and the board.
Well, I think your qualities would have become apparent regardless. Somebody would have noticed them.
Frances, those things don't happen automatically. It takes someone to notice somebody.
That's right.
And you are one of those persons. That's the reason that if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been part of the archives.
Well, maybe somebody else might have reached out.
Nobody else did, and I don't know. But see, the point is,
we never really know. But the fact remains that you do have certain qualities that make it clear that you can make a real contribution that you already have, and you can continue. But not only make a contribution, but really can set a model for other people so that they can too. And I ask you how you reached the point of going into private practice, what you had to take into account. But I think a lot of people who contemplate private practice worry in the same way, and have to go through the same thing. And it helps them to know what somebody else has done successfully. So I think you have had a very good professional life. I'm sure your father would no longer feel that medicine is the only field for you.
Although that's a little sad for me. I mean, we're on the eve of Father's Day here, and when I think about people that I want to let know about my work and I miss my parents.
Is your mother gone too?
Yeah. But she was at that USC, it was then called Los Amigos.
Yes.
There was a dinner, an annual dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I was honored with the Jules Levine Award.
Well, it was nice that you got to see that.
Yeah. USC also believed in me way back. I wasn't the best student. I was, compared to my colleagues in that first year class, I thought, wow, these, I'm not sure if I belong here. And I didn't have the money, but USC offered me not only an acceptance, but it also offered me the scholarship. I mentioned to you before, I think it was a Louise Clevenger scholarship.
Oh, yes.
And one of these days I do want to send a letter to the family acknowledging what their scholarship did for one young student.
Mm-hmm. I think they'd be happy to hear that. This school knows where the relatives are, because we've had continuing contributions from the Clevenger estate and also from the Weyerhausers, because she was very close to Mrs. Weyerhauser, and a lot of this money came actually from the Weyerhausers in Clevenger's name. So I think it's gratifying for the descendants to know that this was helpful, and then they do the same thing.
I'll do that. Norris Class, Mr. Class,
yes,
was a marvelous man. I was scared of him. I took him for policy. And I sat in the back. I didn't say one word in that class. I was scared. I was worried. I didn't know if I could stay in school. I had no confidence in my writing. But we had our first exam. I think it was our first midterm. And we were all really worried about that. Mm-hmm. And I wrote very simply and clearly. And I was the first to leave the exam. You know, we had, I think, 2 hours to write. Uh-huh. People had 3 blue books filled. I had less than 1 blue book. And I just wrote everything that I knew to answer the question. And I turned it in. People were shocked. They thought I was going to flunk the class. Mm-hmm. So I was worried until we got our exams back. And I think everybody did pretty poorly. I think Mr. Klaus was a very tough grader.
Yes, he was a tough grader. And what did he say on yours?
I got an A. I was shocked. Everybody that I knew was shocked, too. Kuroda got an A, but he wrote comments at the very end. You know, he read the papers, he made corrections, and he also had a little paragraph on every single paper. And he talked about how concise and carefully written my answers were. You know, that was the first time I thought, gee, maybe I can write. If Mr. Klass thinks that this is well written.
Well, he was a hard taskmaster.
He was. And I was pleased. I think I had talked to you once about letting him know that. And you gave me his address. At that time he was in poor health. Mm-hmm. And you encouraged me to, if I was going to send that letter, send it quickly.
He was in Kansas.
Yes. And I did, and his wife wrote back to me. And she wrote for him, and she read the letter to him.
Well, that was good. She died this last year.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was good. I think it was an experience for a student to have Nori Klass as a teacher. Not everyone felt as happy about him. And I still hear complaints from time to time, but I hear complaints about me too. So, you know, that's part of the teaching era. But he was a brilliant man, and he had a great deal to offer the student who was interested.
Mm-hmm.
What other experiences did you have at school or in your work that were especially meaningful?
At school, I was at USC at a very difficult time in the history of professional schools. UCLA had demonstrations, and they had a huge problem. I think there was a dean there, Cohen.
Yes, Nathan Cohen.
And I think we ended up having a quota system for all the different groups. Dean Hamovich, Maury Hamovich, was the dean when I was there. And somehow I got tapped for leadership in the Asian group. I'm not sure how. I think I was probably the only one there at this meeting, and someone says, David, we need to have elections, and we want to pick you as our chair or leader.
I think you're very modest, but go ahead.
Well, remember, I didn't feel I belonged. I didn't think I could do the work, so I was pretty scared, but I did go to these meetings. So I became chair of the Asian caucus. And as you know, as you may not know, at that time USC didn't have USC never had a quota system.
No,
Maury felt that
was deliberate.
And I think it was very wise. So because I was the chair of our caucus, we used to have weekly meetings with the dean. So the Chicano caucus chair, the black caucus chair, and the Asian caucus chair used to meet together. We called ourselves a coalition. Sort of a big name for a group of guys. And the dean, in his wisdom, had weekly meetings with us. And it was it was important for him and for the school, but it was important for me personally because I think I realized the responsibilities of leadership. And I was forced to be an advocate for a group, and I wasn't accustomed to that. But I also watched how Dean Hamovich conducted himself and conducted the meetings. And he was always respectful, never raised his voice, and he often said no to what we were asking, but he would give an explanation. He respected us. There was a dignity about him that I saw then and I appreciate even now. So that's another experience that I remember, and I think I try to learn from the best of people. And if I see somebody that I respect, I think, I'm going to do it just like that. Mm-hmm. I think some of that's conscious, and some of it just is unconscious.
Yeah. No, but I think that's good, because we do all need to have patterns to follow. We may turn away from them, but we do it because we know it wasn't right, or we felt it wasn't right, mm-hmm. or we stay with it because we know it was a good model. And Maury Hamovich was that kind of person. He was dean in very difficult years, and this non-quota system, which we adhere to very rigidly, brought criticism from some other schools. But we didn't have strikes. We had more people of minority groups because they fit. It didn't matter how many there were. And I've always thought, and I hope he knows how well he did. I think he does.
I think he does. But that's one thing we can probably all do more of, and that is let people know while they're still able to hear and understand.
In your professional career, is there anything that stands out especially that you wish you had done differently? That's a negative kind of question, but it isn't intended that way. I mean, maybe because of circumstances that were beyond your control. I don't mean where you had the full control.
I wish that sometimes I had different bosses.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means that... Yeah, it's hard to look back and think of anything that I would have done differently. I think if I could have been more generous, if I could have been more thoughtful, I think. Sometimes with people, maybe I was a little tough. With others, I was a little bit too easy. It's hard to look back and think of anything specifically that I would have changed.
Don't press yourself to do so, because and what I had wanted to do when the other cassette ended was to just comment on the fact that you've had a very good professional career, and you have no regrets about not going into medicine.
I think that's true. I see physicians, mm-hmm. both in my practice, among my friends, and I don't think they are any more fulfilled, or they don't value their work more than I do. I feel very blessed and fortunate and proud of my profession and for what the profession has enabled me to do.
Now tell me a little about your family. You have a wife and 2 sons, mm-hmm. and what do they do?
Our younger son he's right after lunch. I'm leaving for La Jolla. Mm-hmm. He graduates from UC San Diego tomorrow. Mm-hmm. He's a philosophy major.
What's he going to do after that?
Well, he doesn't know yet.
Mm-hmm. I've often wondered what philosophy majors do when they get their degrees.
Well, my father was a philosophy major. He became a clergyman.
Into the ministry. And I know some who've gone into social work or into medicine. But maybe it's a good background for whatever direction you want to move in.
I think a liberal arts education and being able to ask the questions and to see things in life that are important, I think is very, very crucial.
What about your other son?
He is 24. He's thinking about, he's going to apply for schools of social work for the fall of 2004.
What's he doing now?
He has been working at the Devereaux Foundation in Santa Barbara with autistic children. That's probably what prompted him to think about social work.
A good reason.
Yeah, he was working with a girl pretty closely and intensely who banged her head, so she had a helmet on. And her diagnosis was autism. And so it's a residential program. She's probably 12, 13 years old. And he was assigned to work with her. She was a terror. She would scare everybody. She had a temper. She would have just get really upset and lash out and hit people. So one day he told me, "Dad, you know what I did? I told her, hit me, because everybody was afraid of her." I said, "I'm not afraid of you. Hit me as hard as you can." He's a pretty stocky guy, tough. So he took his glasses off. "Hit me, anywhere you want. Harder, harder. Is that the best you have?" And so she was hitting him, like kicking him, and she got tired. He said, "See, you can't hurt me. I'm here to help you. I'm not afraid of you." The next day, she took her helmet off. She no longer banged her head. And it was a marvelous turnaround for her.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So I think he realized, wow, I can make this impact on people. This is someone that everybody else has given up on. Her own parents didn't want her at their home, so they put her away at this facility.
Well, it sounds to me like he has the makings of a very good social worker, and that he has some qualities he's gotten from his father. So you should be proud of both of them then.
I am. I'm very proud of both of them, and I tell them that. Ted Turner is an enormously successful man, but I remember reading in a book or an article that the one thing he longs for that he's never heard from his own father is that he loves him and he's proud of him. That's maybe why he's so driven.
There's a lesson in that, too.
So I tell our sons, I love you and I'm proud of you. Letters that I write. I told them when they went away to school, I said, I'll send you something every week. So every week, I would send a little card or note, package.
Well, it sounds to me like you are also a perfect father as well as an excellent social worker.
Well, not perfect, but...
perfect enough. If you don't have any faults, then that's difficult for children, as you know. David, I appreciate very much your giving the time. Is there something you'd like to say that you haven't had a chance to on this tape before we close it up?
I was very honored. I was surprised, actually, that you would ask me for an interview, because I've been doing this work, and oral histories, I think, are designed for people that have made outstanding contributions, and people who made contributions that maybe haven't been documented, but I didn't see myself as someone that would be so honored. But
I see you as having made special contributions in an area that is little known to social workers generally. And I think you have great reason to be proud of what you've done. So I regard you as outstanding.
Well, I appreciate that, and because of that, I said yes. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have said yes. I'll say this about our profession and our work. We all want to make a difference in our lives. There's a book written by, I think, a former executive of a cable company called Halftime, and what he describes is that just like in a football game, after the first half, the coach looks at what works, what doesn't work, and makes the adjustments so that the second half goes better and that the team would even win. And he said he did that in his life. And he's changed his thinking from wanting to be a success in life to wanting his life to have significance. I think that's been important for me. At one time I wanted to be the best social worker in the world, Francis. But it didn't last very long. Because in order to do that, I would have had to give up too much. But I did want to become the best father I could be to my children. So in the course of doing that and being a father, I suppose some of those same commitments and values must have affected or helped my work. The profession has been good to me. USC has been good to me. And I think in the beginning I wasn't a shining star, bright light. Nobody would have seen that, like these high school students most likely to succeed. See, that wouldn't have been me. But there were people that said, I see something in you, I think you can do this. So the school did that originally. Or whatever they saw in my application materials or the interview, apparently there was enough there. And I remain grateful for that decision. I'm not even sure who the admissions director was then.
Yes, it's a woman who's up in Oregon now. I can't think of her name.
Well, but because of the training that I received and the teaching, the mentoring, the encouragement, and you say that if you hadn't recognized these qualities in me, somebody else would have. I don't think that's necessarily true. It takes someone like you, like Rama, to see qualities in somebody and say, I think you can do this. And then we believe in ourselves more than we did before, we were told. The field, I think, is really changing. I told a colleague the other day, my son said, Dad, can I follow you around, just do what you do and watch what you do? I said, well, you really can't sit in on my sessions, but I took him to several meetings. And I told everybody that I met, this is my son, and he's thinking about going into social work. And everybody was pretty positive, except one woman said, oh, well, are you happy or are you sad? I was surprised at her answer, but I realized what she was saying. And I think the field is a very important field, but it's a field with many challenges. But I view the challenges that we've had as things to overcome. I think I often conclude presentations with, there are enough people in the world who are cursing the darkness, who are complaining about cutbacks, who complain about so many things. But why not light more candles, and why not see things, in a more positive way?
Well, I think that's very important. I think it's one thing to observe the setbacks, but it's another to know that you can make them better, you can really overcome them, and can help things move forward. But I'm a natural optimist. And I think in a way you are too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes it very important for us to be in the field of surgery.
The pessimist may be right, but I think the optimists
No.
have a better time, even if we're wrong, at least for the moment, or for as long as we can hold on to our hopes and our dreams. We feel good about that.
Yes, the pessimists make themselves unhappy, as well as the people around them in one way or another. And what they need is to be learned optimists. And we can help them with that.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much, David. No
Sure.
final words you want to say? Here's your chance.
Well, for those of you who are listening to this, you'll hear our voices again, perhaps, but maybe not. But Francis, it's been a real pleasure to spend not only this time, but actually to be with you over these years. And your contributions have been very substantial.